Again, thank you for joining us tonight. We will start in just a moment. Again, thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to begin in just 1 minute. We just wanted to let you know we're about to drop a glossary of acronyms into the chat. This is a resource that's going to break down some of the key terms and abbreviations that we're going to mention throughout tonight's event. And then we'll also make it easier for you to reference later. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're going to begin in just 1 minute. We just wanted to let you know we're about to drop a glossary of acronyms into the chat. This is a Thank you for your patience and good evening and welcome to tonight's live stream event hosted by Disability Rights Arkansas. We are thrilled that you've joined us to learn more about care coordination, what it means, how it works, and what you can do if it's not meeting your needs. I'm Amber Quaid and I'll be guiding you through this informative event. Tonight, we're honored to have Derek Henderson, one of our skilled staff attorneys, as your presenter. Derek brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in disability rights law, and he's here to break down the complexities of care coordination. During this session, we will cover the definitions of care coordination, the role of your care coordinator and what effective coordination looks like, and the options available to you if your care isn't being properly coordinated. Derek will present for about an hour and we'll save time at the end for a Q&A session. So be sure to jot down your questions as we go, or feel free to leave them in the comments. If you're joining us via Zoom, a recording of tonight's presentation, along with the additional resources, will be emailed to you a few days after the session. If you are joining us via YouTube, please email us at info@disabilityrightsar.org. That's info, INFO, @disabilityrightsar.org, letting us know that you would like a copy of the additional resources. So now let's dive into our session with Derek Henderson.
Thank you, Amber. And I'm just very pleased to be here with all of you tonight. Probably there are some who I've had this kind of conversation with before. And so if this is all totally new to you, then I hope that this is just an introduction. If we've had the chance to talk before on some of these things, this may be more of an update on some things. And so either way, I think that there will be things we can get out of it. So I just want to say this is something that, in a 40 to 50-minute talk, it's impossible to really get into the weeds of managed care coordination. So this will be available. I hope that you'll just, you know, not make yourself take every note. I know some of you are so good at that because I go to a lot of the same conferences and things with you. I know you are good at it. I hope that, that'll give you a little bit of latitude to just be able to think about what questions you might have. And as you sleep on it, you'll have more questions. Please just reach out to us with that. I have to give a quick disclaimer, which is obviously, this is not legal advice. I can't, in this presentation, without knowing your specific needs and concerns, I cannot tell you what to do or what not to do or what the risks of that might be. So just please be aware. And also, this does not create an attorney-client relationship. Now, there could be some folks with whom we already have an agreement, and that would be, a separate thing. But this presentation itself does not create that relationship. But please, in the days, weeks, months that follow, if you have questions, reach out to us and we will certainly talk with you about what options are available and whether we need to look at having an attorney-client relationship to possibly represent you. I have to give another little disclaimer, which is the concept of attorney-client privilege. And we've all watched enough TV to know it's a thing. What it means is if you need to tell me something or any attorney something, you need to be able to tell the full truth to that person without fear that they're going to have to use it against you. And so privilege is pretty strong, but if we put something in the chat, then it's not going to be privileged. And also, I will just say, when you share something with third parties in general, it's not privileged. And if you tell your friend Bill something as a third party, a non-attorney third party, it would not be privileged. And that means Bill could be made to testify about it. And it also means that if I, as your attorney, know that Bill knows about that, I will not be able to legitimately assert privilege. And it's just not something I play games with. I always tell folks when they ask me, what should I look for in a lawyer? An honest one is the answer. And so just please be aware. Generally speaking, be careful about who you share things with if you think you might need privilege to apply to it. So about us very quickly, we're the Designated Protection and Advocacy Agency for Arkansas. There are federal laws that created us. The state has to designate someone, that is us. And our website is where you can learn a lot more, the most quickly and efficiently. And I'll just share a couple of things that I think are worth pointing out. Our priority issues, you can find those. And I always want people to know, if you have an issue that does not fall under our priorities, that does not mean it's not important. It doesn't mean we don't prioritize it or see the importance of it. It's that we have to, as an organization, by law, set priorities and have our board approve them. And so two of our priorities are Medicaid and public outreach. So we're addressing two of those tonight, and you can see some of the other priorities on our website. Also, people ask a lot of times, how can we get involved? And I'll tell you two really easy ways. There's a board of directors, and there's also a Pay Me Advisory Council, and you can learn more about what that is on our website. And those things, we can have folks apply to serve on those. So certainly learn more about those and see if you think that would be a good fit for you. Also, you'll see that I highlighted in two places. We take donations. We are almost fully funded by federal grants, and we always need more to be able to serve more. And so if you can share that with anyone, or if you have that ability, please consider and just be aware it is there. And the most important thing I can share with you on the site is how to contact us and get help. We are not, looking for your money to give you help. That's not a prerequisite. We have the two links for help. Also, we've mentioned the info email, and we have other contact information that we will share at the end. So quickly about me, I'm one of our staff attorneys here. I do a lot of Medicaid work, particularly with PASSES, a little bit on guardianship rights, education cases, and a little bit on helping folks to try to protect some confidential medical records, especially if those maybe get out in a court process or something like that. So this audience probably includes some folks I know, and probably some that I will get to know. Past employees, I certainly hope that we have some of those, and welcome. Always, it's good to see you turn up for these things because you do it for your members. And I want your members to know that your passes show up to these things for you because they do support you, knowing your rights and being able to exercise those. So welcome, very glad to have you. Direct service providers, those are the folks who give the day-to-day services, the supportive living and things like that. And you're just absolutely integral to our clients. Thank you for being here. DHS and other state agencies and other nonprofits and organizations, welcome. Certainly hope that you are with us. And most importantly, our self-advocates and our family advocates, you are always the centerpiece at these things. And I certainly hope that we're able to share some things that are of value to you. So just to kind of lay out what our roadmap is here, the key points that we'll be able to address and hopefully at least scratch the surface on: what is a PASSE and who works for them to give you that care coordination? What is care coordination? And most importantly, what can you do to protect your rights that you have with care coordination? So this one, many of you need no explanation, but we always have folks who are coming into this fresh and certainly need a little background. The PASSES. What is a PASSE? Well, on your acronym sheet, you can certainly see it as a provider-led Arkansas shared savings entity. And what that really is, it's a company. I would liken it to an insurance company. It's a private company that contracts with the state of Arkansas. And under that contract, the state pays the PASSE a certain amount per member. And that amount that they pay depends on what tier that member falls into. And we'll talk a little more about tiers, but That amount is a flat rate, and the actual cost of care for a member may be more or it may be less than that. And so the risk is kind of spread around between all of the members in that way. So the federal laws that allow managed care organizations like the PASSES, those use the term MCO or managed care organization. And that's exactly what they are supposed to do. It's pretty self explanatory. They manage the care of the members. Now, when I say manage, that means helping the members to find appropriate providers. It means helping the members to apply to receive coverage for those services. And it does also mean that the company has to make decisions about whether or not to approve that service or whatever it is that you're requesting. And it could be a service, it could be medication, it could be durable medical equipment. But the company does make that decision, and then you do have rights depending on what the decision is. But they manage the care by making sure that you have access and helping you to apply and actually get that care. So there are two different groups of folks who are served by the passes. The first is the CES waiver group, and that is formerly what was called the DD waiver or the developmental disability waiver. And that's what we just hear called waiver usually. When people say, I receive waiver services, they're usually talking about something like supportive living. It's a service that is only available in most cases for a CES waiver approved member. And then the second group that passes serve, they serve people who are identified as having serious behavioral health needs. And the way that they are identified is through the independent assessment process. And sometimes you will just hear that called the Optum assessment. But both groups of folks have to have that Optum assessment. And that is how we are assigned to tiers. What is our tier of need? Tier 1, 2, or 3. So you get assigned to a pass. You're approved for waiver or you're approved for behavioral health services and you're assigned to a pass. What do? Well, they have to follow a lot of federal and state rules for how to manage your care. Okay. So they don't get to just come up with all the rules themselves. There are a lot of parameters that are placed on them, and they have to follow those. Now, two things that are very important to know before we even get to care coordination: they have to make sure that you can access medically necessary care. Now, what is medically necessary sometimes can be open to debate, but there is a long state definition, and I will boil it down to this. If you have some kind of condition that affects your life and there is something that can help with that condition, then that could be medically necessary. They may look at other alternatives, but if there's a condition that you need help with, then something needs to be identified as medically necessary. It may not be the first service that you request, but something should be identified as the thing to help you with that. And another thing they have to do, the passes have to consider non-medical community supports and services to make community living available and to allow you to continue to do it. Okay. There are a lot of different legal concepts that are kind of tied into this. And one of them, many of you have heard this and know this: you have a right to live in your community and receive your services in your community. And I'm not going to get into those weeds right now, but you have that right. And so if you need medically necessary services, or if there are non-medical supports and services that you need to enable your community living, then those should be considered by a PASSE as well. We'll talk about what your options are and when to exercise those, but just be aware, medical necessity, and usually we just call that NCSS, non-medical community supports and services. I think that I left that off of my acronym chart, but NCSS is what it is called in the state contract. So those things are important, but care coordination is probably the bigger part. Okay. And we'll dive into that deeper. I do want to give you one quick tip, and this is specifically directed toward people and their families when the member is under 21 years of age. So here's a scenario. Your PASS tells you we can't cover that service for you because you're on the wait list or you're a behavioral health client. And so, whatever that service is you request, we cannot cover it for you at this time. We're very sorry. We really wish we could. We're sorry, but we cannot. Well, if you're under 21 years of age, you can tell them that you have good news because there is a set of federal regulations called EPSDT, which is in your acronym book, and that allows them to consider early interventions, which are not limited to just what is available under the state plan. And the reason behind that, the federal government funding this program wants early intervention. Early intervention helps to avoid having to have more services later. So if you are young, they can, and I believe that they must at least consider whether it's appropriate under EPSDT. That's a big one to drop in the middle of everything, but please just learn those letters. So who's working for the PASSES? Care coordinators, they're going to be your first point of contact. You may encounter their supervisors at different times. And also, there are clinical staff who review the requests for services that you make. There are other people who are just kind of in business capacities with the PASSES, but these are the two groups of people with whom you are most likely to have some contact. Now, care coordinators, I can't say enough about them because I came into this almost 3 years ago. I didn't know a thing about managed care or care coordination, but one of the first people I talked to was a care coordinator, and that person knew her member front and back, everything about, his history, everything he needed. And that person was just so invested in the people she was serving as a care coordinator. And I have sort of learned to talk, I guess, a certain code, because one of the first times that I probably brought up the issue of, well, I'm not sure we're getting appropriate care coordination here, I believe someone thought I meant there was an issue with the care coordinator. And that is usually not the case. Care coordinators care immensely. They really do. And if they don't, they will not be in that job for very long, because you just simply cannot sustain in that job without being really invested in the people you're serving. So they really do know their people. They are not authorized to make the big decisions. They don't have that ability. And so it's not an issue usually of them. Usually what it is that we need more folks at the table. And so when I say they cannot do it alone, they can do their jobs, but their job is not to do all of care coordination, because care coordination is a much bigger thing than one job title. So care coordination, I'm not just making it up. It's in the federal and state regulations. It's in the state contract. And the way it's defined, my definition kind of pulls a couple of different things together. Now, I think I'm correct. I don't say things that I haven't thought about a lot. I don't say things that I think are going to be wrong. I think my definition is correct, but I do want to give the disclaimer that this is not verbatim how it is written in any one place. But what you find across several of the regulations, you put them all together, and what the passes are required to do is to ensure ongoing delivery of services and supports that are appropriate to each member's needs, including transitions between settings of care. That's a mouthful, and I won't say it again at you right now, but you can see it. You'll get this after the presentation. And I think if you are a member or supporting a member, I would tell you to really ruminate some on that definition and ask yourself in different situations, are the people at my pass ensuring delivery that is ongoing, that is appropriate to the member's needs? Are they taking into account transitions between settings of care? And ask yourself those questions, because if you're not feeling yes on all of it, then you might need to talk to them. Let's break that down a little bit, okay? So, ensuring delivery, ongoing, appropriate to the member's needs. This has not all been, fully litigated. It's never gone before the Supreme Court or anything like that. And so the words in the statutes and regulations have not all been, completely parsed and defined. But I think we can glean a few things, and there could be some honest disagreement with how I frame these things, but I think that this is a pretty straightforward reading of it. Ensure delivery means monitoring the people who provide the care, okay? Passes contract with providers, but ultimately, passes are responsible for making sure that the provisions of the state contract are met. And that is a verbatim almost statement from the federal regulations, that even if the passes contract, they still have to make sure that the state contract is met. Ongoing. Now, it's kind of self-explanatory. You don't have gaps or lapses. I think what is harder to, kind of remember is it's ongoing. It needs to follow you. It needs to follow what's happening in your life. It needs to be aligned with the member's current needs. So just because it's always been this way doesn't mean it always needs to be this way. For example, just because a member has always been approved for 16 hours of supportive living services, but has not been approved for overnight supportive living services, that does not mean that circumstances cannot change. And so those current needs are very important for making sure that services are actually ongoing. And it needs to be focused on what goals a member has, okay? And when I say goals, there are goals developed in several different places. I think I highlight that on a slide in a couple of minutes here, so I'll talk more about that. But it's not just, your vague life goals. There will be written goals, and the services that are approved and the services that are considered need to keep this in mind, okay? We're not just warehousing people and, just keeping an eye on them. We're making sure that people can have meaningful lives in their communities, meaningful participation in their communities, meaningful employment, meaningful and gainful competitive employment. And so all of the services need to take into account these different changes and these different needs and goals. One note I'll add on to ongoing. We talked about how it needs to follow your life. One mistake, there's kind of a balance here because it's a mistake to make if the member is not actually getting coverage. Okay, if the member is approved for 24/7 supportive living coverage and the member is only actually receiving 12 hours of that, I really hope that the passes are noticing that what is approved and then what is actually paid out in billing, there's a discrepancy. I really hope that that is being noticed. If it's not, then it needs to be brought to their attention. That's one way that this can be a problem with lack of ongoing care. But again, it can be a problem if you assume that the member always wants a high level of hands-on care. Many people want to get more independent and they want their house back. They want their home. They want their life. And that was kind of brought home to me at something I attended recently. We owe that to people to not just assume that they always need to be watched and they always need to be talked to about things. And I think this is the key with care coordination. Care that is appropriate to the member's needs. That means member focused, that means goal focused, and individualized. Now, member focused, we're focusing on what the member's needs are. And as I said earlier, the payment that the state makes to a PASSE any given month, the member's needs could be more or less than that. And if the member, has needs that exceed that budget, there are certain reasonable limitations on some services that can be imposed. That is true. But there are other areas where there is not going to be that kind of hard and fast limit. And even when there are limits, they're often not as hard and fast as some people think. So anytime you need more, don't accept the first no. We should probably at least talk. Goal focused. Again, you've got goals in the person-centered service plan, in the providers plan, and just, the goals that you develop with the member in that responsive process of planning and delivering care. When we say individualized, many of you probably know what an IEP is. In education, in public school, an IEP is an individualized education plan. I like to think about IEPs for this because with an IEP, we always say you can't have a cookie cutter approach to it. Sure, if you have 10 students in your school who have behavior plans, there could be some similar goals and some similar aspects in those plans. But if I'm noticing that we basically ran off some copies and changed the names at the top, that would be a lack of individualized education. Okay. So the individualized process means, what do we learn through the independent assessment, the IA? What do we learn through the PCSP goals? And what do we learn through the provider goals that this person is trying to work toward? Where are they in that IA? And then where are we trying to get with the PCSP and the provider goals? Another little just extra pro tip for you. The rule on care coordination specifically mentions transitions between settings. And I'll give you a couple of red flags to think about for that. One is super abrupt transitions. Okay. I'm in a residential psychiatric treatment unit because I've had a serious mental health episode, and I am somewhat stabilized from medication. I'm still certainly dealing with a lot, and um, just returning to things as they were would probably not be advisable. My medical staff at the center are telling me I should not, at this time, just do a cold discharge. And yet I'm told you will discharge on Tuesday. That's one red flag. That could be a care coordination issue. Okay. Um, on that one specifically, I will say that's one where you have to act kind of quickly. Okay. And that may include contacting us or other people who may be able to help you rather quickly. The other is over or under intensive services, especially if it's long term. Okay. Let's say that, I've been placed in that psychiatric treatment unit. And as we said, I'm improving. I'm certainly still not, where it would be advisable to do a cold discharge. But for convenience sake, we decide we'll just keep him in that restrictive psychiatric unit. That is another red flag because there should be options to start to transition and to start to step down, as we say sometimes. So, I want to talk about a couple of examples. And, we don't have the ability to talk back and forth, but you think about these examples and then I'll kind of give you my impressions. Here's a behavioral health example. We've got a behavioral health member, serious psychiatric and behavioral needs. He has an episode of dysregulated behavior and he receives treatment at a residential facility. They stabilize the immediate behaviors with medication changes. He is still dealing with significantly increased anxiety. It's likely to affect her job, her ability to live independently and perform her work and participate in community activities. Um, so, what does coordinating care look like for this person? My impressions: don't assume that the answer is just always to extend the residential treatment. If she is improving, and she is, then we need to be asking, is this the best place for her? That doesn't mean that the options are here or nothing. They cannot be. The options cannot just be here or nothing. That is another issue if that happens. This highlights the importance of communication between the PASSE, the treating providers, and the member. The toughest cases that I have, and this is a type of case where this happens, usually the first thing that I do is I try to get everybody to the table, and I'm not the only person who makes those efforts. I do want to be clear about that. There is a lot of recognition that we benefit when we're communicating clearly and we're not playing the telephone game, because there are cases where there really just are some serious miscommunications. And my third impression here is, do we need some kind of interim setting? Again, not just a cold discharge. Do we need some kind of intensive community supports or other supports? Now, I don't know if anyone is gonna have this thought, but I'm wondering, okay, this is a behavioral health person. They're kind of limited on what supports are normally covered. But is there any little acronym that I mentioned earlier that comes to mind that might, support them in the community? And if you are thinking NCSS, non-medical community supports and services, then pat yourself on the back, because that would be one of the first things I would say. I would very quickly point out that we may need to consider this service, which would not normally be covered, as a non-medical community support and service. Yes, I understand that it's not normally covered, and I understand that we cannot ask you to determine whether it is medically necessary, but we can ask you whether it should be considered and approved as a non-medical community support and service. A CES waiver example, quickly. We have a member with spina bifida, and the member lives independently and uses a manual wheelchair. He is involved in a car accident. He suffers a badly broken arm. He is otherwise unharmed. He has to be hospitalized. He actually has to have surgery on his arm. They keep him for 3 days, and he's approved for discharge. But you see the problem. He's been living independently, but he's been living using a manual wheelchair. He'll have an issue with that. And anyone suddenly having no use of one arm is probably going to need some changes. And so, what are the things that we need to consider in coordinating this member's care? Here are my impressions. Please, please, please do not just keep him in the hospital so that he has somewhere to be, okay? That is an overly intensive service that is not appropriate to the member's needs. Nobody wants that, so we're not going to do that. We can't just send him home with flowers and wishing him well, okay? He needs that support. He needs something different. And I'm not just making this up out of nowhere. We're not going to a nursing home. He does not need to be in a nursing home. If we're willing to cover the expense of a stay in a nursing home, then certainly I think there are other options outside of a nursing home that we can consider. And with a CES client, those will be usually a lot easier. Now, again, there could be an issue of this client being on the wait list. He may be 23 years old, and he may be still on the waiver wait list. That's where we talk about things like non-medical community supports and services. Get everybody to the table. Talk with your care coordinator about this, but usually the more people we get to the table, from the providers, from the PASSEs, and sometimes even from organizations like us, usually the better outcome you're going to get. So let's just say that those situations go south, and they do. The members have not received what they feel is appropriate care coordination, and they feel really strongly about it. My member on CES waiver, he has been offered only the option to stay in the hospital or be placed in a nursing home. Those are the only things that he's been offered. And he absolutely objects to both of those. So, what are his rights? How does he exercise those? And I'm going to go from least formal to most formal. The first thing is what we should just be doing all the time: ask for more. Talk to people, talk to your care coordinator, and talk to other people within the PASSE, talk to providers and other stakeholders in the system who can help with this. Communication is key. I have seen times where there really was a simple misunderstanding and it just needed to be cleared up, okay? And that is a very rewarding thing when you can do that. It also sometimes is a little bit scary when you realize, wow, if we had not asked one question, then we might have continued down this road. So please, steer those conversations and get everyone to the table. It could be that maybe the service you requested is not going to be approved, but there could be another service that is comparable and would be equally effective. And if it would be equally effective, then that would be something that would probably meet the obligation to coordinate your care. So start with the least formal, I think. I will say, yeah, I wanted to make sure I had that. As I'm talking about, care coordinators being involved, go to your care coordinator first. I really strongly believe that. And I understand that not everyone has the same experience with their care coordinator for a lot of different reasons. Um, if a person comes in new as a care coordinator, it takes a little while to get your feet under you. Um, if you have a great and responsive care coordinator, that can make all the difference. But, try to work with that person and be patient, because many of them want to be that care coordinator for you, but they've got to work up to that. So here's just a thought for care coordinators, and I cannot tell you whether this is advisable. I just would encourage you to have this conversation within your teams. I would encourage you to have this conversation with your supervisors. I think that in a perfect world, if a member told you, the care coordinator, I don't feel like I'm getting what I need. Well, you, the care coordinator, know that you are not able to just wave your hands and make it happen. I think in a perfect world, care coordinators should not be afraid to say, listen, you have every right to exercise all of the rights available to you here. You should certainly consider talking to someone like your friends over at Disability Rights. I cannot tell you whether there will be blowback from that, okay? I really hope, and I hope that if it's not this way now, I hope that your conversations can steer it in this direction. I hope that PASSES have policies that not only allow that kind of thing from care coordinators, but would actually encourage it. I believe, and I think that the law supports me on this, I believe care coordinators are supposed to have a healthy amount of separation from the other processes that go on. So a care coordinator should not be worried about the money aspect of things, okay? A care coordinator should be able to just worry about the member's needs, help the member access care. And if it is turned down by the utilization management department, then the care coordinator is there to try to help you find the next right thing. And I don't want care coordinators. I really hope that, a care coordinator is not worried, well, if I recommend that, it could reflect poorly on me because, that will be a costly thing. Care coordinators and the best ones I've met, I think would agree with this. They should not be worried one bit about that bottom line. That's for someone else to worry about. And I won't get any further into that. But I really hope care coordinators would not be afraid to tell folks, hey, you have every right to talk to disability rights. But that's not saying that you think the company is wrong. Okay. If your care coordinator says that to you, they're not saying that they think the company is wrong. I wouldn't expect them to, but they can encourage you and, just remind you that you have rights. So the formal one doesn't work, or the informal doesn't work. Grievance is the next step. It's a formal complaint, generally in writing. It is not a life or death thing, okay? Filing a grievance is not going to get anyone fired in 99% of cases. If there is something that results in someone's termination, it would have happened with or without a grievance, okay? Because a grievance is just not going to be the thing that does that. When you put a grievance in writing, it can be on any issue, and the PASSES have to give you a written response. I believe that is within 30 days. Now, there is a time limit on grievances. If the grievance is about an event that happened or an incident that happened, then you have to file the grievance within 45 days of that event. When we're talking about something like care coordination, it's usually not about one or two events. It's about an ongoing pattern of things that are happening and not happening. So usually with care coordination, you'll usually have a grievance available to you. So the next step up from a grievance, and sometimes you would do this instead of a grievance, would be an appeal. Um, an appeal is something that's available to you when the PASSE has taken adverse action. And adverse action does not mean it has to be a denial of services. It does not mean that it has to even be in writing. There are a number of things that are defined in the state regulations that can be adverse action. And one of the resources that I will refer you to with the materials that go out after this, I will send you a link to the most current state PASS manual because they define things like adverse action and you can see what things might fit into it. Normally, you have to file that within 30 days of the adverse action. Again, with something like care coordination, it could be a little more flexible. It must be in writing unless it is an expedited appeal. Most appeals will not be expedited appeals because that's only usually available in true kind of emergency situations. Write out your concerns, send it to them. You can even request to meet with the PASS after you appeal because the federal regulations do say that you have a right to present written or oral argument and evidence. And so I have seen parents and self advocates write absolutely, I'm talking masterpiece appeals. And theirs are better than mine. I'm just going to be blunt about that. When we're talking about an appeal or a grievance, you know your situation, it's probably better than what I'm going to write in some regards. If you are denied on a grievance or an appeal, you do have a right to request a state fair hearing from the Department of Human Services. It's a more formal and complex process. We do actually, in some cases represent folks in those. And I will tell you that it is difficult the way that the law is currently interpreted to get a decision. I want to be careful in how I say this because I don't want this to sound, overly inflammatory. But sometimes I've had to manage expectations with clients and explain that DHS is bound by how the law is written and interpreted at that specific time. And they are not going to be able to just look at your situation and decide, oh, well, this is what would be the just outcome. That's not what they are enabled to do. And so they may want to change it, but when they feel they are bound by the law, that is what they're going to have to follow. I will note that one of the reasons with the fair hearing process that I would say that's probably a point to really consider talking to an attorney. That's when some of the legal arguments get a lot more important because I might want to make an argument that, this rule should be interpreted this way in this situation, or this law, should take precedence over this other law. It is more complex, but I have certainly known parents who have represented and self advocates who have represented in those things and have prevailed. And so it's not something that's totally out of the question, but I'd say talk to us at least. One quick note on representation. You generally have the right at any of these stages to involve anybody that you want. You got to make sure you tell people. Now, if you have an attorney, that attorney knows that. That attorney is telling people. But I just want to make sure because I have had some clients before who, have had this thought, and I understand it. Let's see the look on their faces when you show up, and that's not what's going to happen, because if I show up unannounced, there will not be a meeting. Just be aware of that. If I were to show up unannounced, one, it would be unethical of me. Two, there will not be a meeting, because they will not at that point meet without their attorney present, and they are justified in that. So certainly, if you are involving an attorney, just be upfront about that. If you have a state fair hearing, your attorney is actually required to notify the Office of Appeals and Hearings at least 10 days before the hearing. So you cannot, in that case, just get a last minute attorney. They have to enter an appearance before they just show up at that hearing, because they have to give the other party a fair opportunity to secure counsel. A couple of things that I will share. We do have some sample grievances and appeals. I have had to learn that I am not everything in a bag of chips. Okay. I am not the best at writing every grievance for every person. I need to trust members more, trust self advocates, trust family advocates to address a lot of these things themselves. And they know the facts of their case better than I do. And they are often the best first resort on this. So please, look those over. Um, that's not telling you that we never, ever, ever would do that. But if it is a grievance about, I'm supposed to receive this many hours and my staff are not showing up, then that's probably one that you could write up very effectively. And also, you get the benefit that you don't have to involve an attorney at that point. And so they don't have an attorney at that point. So there are definite benefits to starting at that level, and be detailed, because that will, certainly guide what I can accomplish or another attorney can accomplish for you later. Bottom line is this, okay? If you think that you are not getting access to the ongoing appropriate care that you need, not the care that someone thinks is appropriate for someone with your disability, but the care that you need. If you think that is not happening, then you need to address that with your PASSE. And I would start it with informal talks. Don't be afraid to tell your care coordinator, this isn't about you. We really need to get your boss involved, because there are going to be some things that are going to need to go up the chain. So don't be afraid to ask for that. And I am happy to take a few questions, but I've also told Amber that anything we're not able to address, because she, has to, just pick a few lucky people. Anything we can't address, you send it to our info email, or you give it to her through one of our other avenues. And I will do my best to either address that through a frequently asked questions page that I'll send with the post webinar materials, or we may make contact with you. And Amber, I am happy to take questions.
As of right now, Derek, I will give people a moment to leave questions in the chat. I know we've had a little bit of issues with the chat tonight, and I do apologize for the technical issues. If the chat is not working for you, you can raise your hand, or you can leave it in the Q&A chat as well, and we'll be able to answer it then. I'll give you just a few minutes to leave your questions if you would like them answered tonight live with Derek, or as Derek has said, you can leave the questions later on all of our platforms, and we'll try to answer them as quickly as we can on social media for you, whether it's directly through a reply, or if we create a separate social media post to address that issue. So I'll give people just a few minutes here. We do have a few, this is streaming on a few channels, so I have to look at all the channels. But I'll give everyone just a minute to put their questions into the chat. But thank you so much, Derek. I appreciate all this information. Every time I do one of these Facebook Lives, I always learn something new. I love that we have someone of your caliber sharing this information with us.
And Amber, I see one with you probably have methods, means, and ways that I don't, but I see one, and if it's okay, I'd be happy to answer this one. It's a good question.
Okay, I'll read it out loud, and then you
And
please feel free to answer it. Yes, absolutely. So one of the questions we have is not just care coordination, but passes in general. Why don't all passes have to cover what Medicaid covers?
so, good news, they do. Okay, they certainly have to cover what is on the Medicaid state plan, and they have to make all of those services available. And the reason why it's called waiver is because it's a waiver of normal limits. It's a waiver that allows for services that would not be normally covered under the state plan. So what I'll tell you is that would probably be a really good thing to elaborate on in an email to the info email, and what it is that maybe is not being covered. But I'll also tell you, send us that email, but do a separate email to your care coordinator that's very similar, and tell the person what it is you're looking for. And I understand there's probably already been some back and forth on this, but make a clear ask. And notice that I said put it in an email. Getting things in writing, that is solid gold when you can. And it is not trying to play gotcha, because guess what? That can backfire on you if you put things in writing that, don't help later. But it just helps all of us understand that, we have to be accountable for what we say.
And again, we appreciate all of y'all being here tonight. We know that, as Derek stated earlier, and just now, that putting anything in writing, including in our chat, may be holding you back. And if so, again, please email us at the info@disabilityrightsar.org. I have put it in the chat. We did have another question come in, because I will give it just a few more minutes and then we'll end the Q&A session. So if you want to get your questions in, please put them in the chat or the Q&A chat as well. I'll keep an eye on both of those. We have another question. It says, we haven't been assigned a care coordinator yet, but this has been great information to get us started. And that's exactly why we have a webinar like this. Derek is very well informed in sharing the information. If you want to add anything, Derek, to that, you can. I know it wasn't a question, but I just wanted to shout out that someone appreciates your information.
And I do want to say something on that. That's a very apropos comment to make to all of this, because what that brings up is many of us could be at many different points. Okay, some of us may have just been approved for waiver. If you've been approved for waiver and you have not been assigned to a PASSE yet, then you may not have had your independent assessment completed. If you've not had your independent assessment completed, and if it's not scheduled, contact the DHS waiver, CES waiver phone number. And I will include that in the materials. I think I already have that in a one-pager. But let DHS know that, because DHS might need to get Optum to call you back. I have seen that happen before. It is something that can be fixed very easily. Now, if you are assigned to a PASSE and you have not been assigned a care coordinator yet, I will include information on how to contact the care coordinator supervisors that it is available publicly. Okay. It's not anything that is a secret from me, but I will share that information because they need to know if you're a member, but you don't have a care coordinator. That supervisor absolutely needs to know it.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight for this important discussion on care coordination. We hope you found this information valuable and feel more empowered to advocate for your rights. A big thank you to Derek Henderson for sharing his expertise and for guiding us through these complex but crucial topics. And thank you to all of you for your thoughtful questions during this Q&A here. Of course, if you want to leave any additional ones, we'll get to them as soon as we can. Just again, keep an eye on our social media platforms where we'll try to address them all. Of course, you can find us on all major social media platforms under the name Disability Rights Arkansas. As a reminder, if you registered through via Zoom, you will receive an email soon with the presentation, the recording of the session, and all those additional resources that Derek talked about to help you navigate care coordination. But if you have any further questions or need any additional support, of course, please don't hesitate to reach out to Disability Rights Arkansas. You can visit our website at disabilityrightsar.org. You can call our intake at 501-296-1775. Again, you can visit our website at disabilityrightsar.org or call our intake at 501-296-1775 or connect with us on social media for updates on future events and resources. We truly appreciate your time and your commitment to learning more about your rights. Have a great evening, and thank you for being a part of this important conversation.